this short story, The Second Visitor, it was another course at City Lit, write a short story in a weekend class. And I've just realised I haven't written a short story since. That was 2009. So you have to judge for yourself whether that was a good decision. And to get your sympathy, I have just been bitten by a wasp. Okay. The Second Visitor. Pedder was the first visitor. Mudger was expecting him, listening out for the chains on his wheels. No more snow had fallen since his last delivery, and his tar tracks had frozen into deep channels, guiding his truck towards her house. "Hey," he called. Mudger stayed in the kitchen, leaving Ulf to welcome Pedder by barking and eating the snow that fell from his boots. "You want some apple tea? It's hot on the stove." Mudger had already ladled Pedder's tea into the mug she reserved for him. It was larger than others in her cupboard, made of thick pottery and painted in a bold craft style. It was most appropriate, felt Mudger. Pedder put the box on the kitchen counter in front of the window. It was midday, but the curtains were closed. There was so little light at this time of year, you'd be mad to stop it coming into the house. Pedder reached out to the faded gingham drape. "No!" Mudger was at his side, too late to stop him. She cried out as the curtain was pulled back. It wasn't the light that caused her pain. They looked through the window. In the middle of the frozen lake was a pile of rubbish, dumped. The low winter sun was unable to penetrate the mound. It squatted on the white ice, its contents bound together darkly. There could be anything out there. "They have balls driving their cars on the ice," said Pedder. "They have balls dumping their crap on my lake." Mudger turned her attention to the delivery. She unpacked the contents of the box onto the wooden countertop. Pasta, rice, pulses, other dry goods arranged to the right of the box, jars to the left. She held a bouquet of fresh herbs to her nose, inhaling the scent of summer flown in from Africa. Every winter, it gets worse. She slammed her hand flat on the counter. Ulf ran under the table whimpering. "If I get my hands on them, I will. I would." She bowed her head. The hair in front of her face returned the view to white. That night, foxes tore into the rubbish, scattering it wide across the ice. Their yelps woke Mudger. She lay in bed remembering the lake in summers past, when its glittering waters were nanny, nursery and playground for her children. They would play for hours, day after day, splashing and laughing in the lake's cool embrace. The sound of the foxes was not so different to the screams of overexcited children. Years ago, Matthias built a wooden jetty, with moorings for rowing boats and a raised diving platform. The jetty reached far into the lake, deep enough to avoid the tangled weeds which would wrap their green fingers around passing oars and dangling limbs. Matthias never dived from the platform, preferring to wade from the shore, the plants brushing against his thighs. In her eagerness to reunite Matthias with the lake, Mudger had thrown his ashes from the jetty rather than sprinkling them through the fringed shoreline. A sharp bark brought Mudger back to the rubbish. Last year someone left a fridge freezer. When the thaw came, it sank, taking the volatile gases which would one day bubble through the weeds into the atmosphere. Mudger imagined the gases bouncing off the ozone layer, like balls pinging off a rainbow-striped wall in her son's computer game from the 1980s, chipping away at the sky's protective skin until nothing was left. What smells had seeped out of the rubbish to tempt the foxes? What new filth to disturb Matthias resting in the still depths of the lake? There would be no more rubbish, thought Mudger. She was washing her supper dishes when Ulf scratched at the front door. She laid down the bristle brush. "What is it, boy? A reindeer?" She pulled open the door. It was never locked, not even at night. Ulf disappeared into the darkness. Mudger finished washing. She dried the dishes, put them away, wiped the kitchen surfaces, smoothed the breakfast tablecloth, pushing her foot under the table to nudge Ulf's sleeping belly. He was still outside. She called from the doorway. There was no response, no bark, no scampering of paws. Pesky dog. Mudger went to open the hall cupboard, then remembered it was now a bathroom. Her muscle memory, developed through a lifetime of tidying blankets and waterproofs, tennis rackets and folding chairs, was keener than her real memory. Mudger still showered outdoors in the summer, getting shampoo in her eyes because she couldn't bear to close them to the lake. She never minded the outside toilet. It's eco-friendly, she'd argued. I thought your generation cared about the environment. But her daughter insisted, I won't have my children living like wild things. Madja pulled on her boots, evidence of another intervention from her daughter. The ice grippers were now a permanent fixture on Madja's boots, gaudy yellow plastic against the polished leather. Madja had tried to take them off so she could clean the boots, but they were too tight. It was better to suffer these adjustments than to upset her daughter. She never understood why Madja sold the flat in Stockholm to stay in the summer house. You can fall and hurt yourself, you should be with your family, you'll be lonely. Madja was never lonely by the lake. She had her memories, and she had Matthias. Ulf, here boy, come on. She stepped onto the path and away from the light. She turned towards the lake. A man was slumped against the woodshed, his head on the wall, his hat pushed over his eyes. Ulf stood on the man's lap, his front paws resting on his chest as he licked the man's chin. Madja rushed towards them. Are you okay? The man shoved Ulf away roughly. He had no need of the comfort of dogs now help had arrived. He looked at Madja. Is there no one else? He held out his hands. Madja looked at him, helpless in the snow. She took his hand, braced herself and pulled him upright. He flung his weight onto her, unable to stand alone, one leg raised. The years of chopping wood and clearing paths helped her support him as they limped to the front door. Ulf encouraged them from behind. Once inside, the man collapsed into Matthias's chair, his hands grasping the worn armrest where once Matthias balanced his reading glasses and military history book. Madja knelt at the man's feet and unlaced his boots, starting with his good leg. His boots were made of shiny black leather with flat, thin soles, city boots designed for stepping into shops and restaurants, not for wading through snow. There's no mobile signal. I thought I was going to die. Afraid I wasn't crawling towards a security lamp. We don't get many visitors once summer has gone. Why would anyone come to this godforsaken hole? Madja set the boot to one side. She picked at the laces on the other foot. You did. I was just dropping something off. Ouch, don't be so rough. Dropping what off? What's it to you? Madja sat back on her heels and looked at him. His hair and eyebrows were paler than his skin, as if he'd just returned from holiday. He'd never have an old-fashioned summer house like those that circled the lake. He would fly south to lounge in the Mediterranean sun and soak in its bath-warm waters. The lake was only good for his rubbish. Would you like some apple tea? I thought you people drank to get through the winter. He looked down at her as she knelt before him. She met his gaze. Whiskey or vodka? I'll start with the whiskey. He took the glass and knocked it back. She handed him the bottle. It was Matthias's single malt. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away. Do you want some painkillers? Christ, yes. Madja kept paracetamol in the kitchen drawer, but she went into the bathroom instead. She searched through the bottles in the cabinet until she found the plain white prescription box. She pulled the foil out the packet, separating it from Matthias's name and the instruction to avoid alcohol. She pushed 2 pills onto her palm with a satisfying pop. This will do, she thought as she closed the cabinet door. It took several glasses, but soon he was asleep, his jaw slack against his open collar. Hey, hey! Madja slapped his face. He didn't rouse. She pulled his boots back on. He didn't feel a thing. It had started snowing. Flakes large as daisies fell through the pine trees. The weeks of below-minus temperature had created a solid crust which bore his weight, the new snow a lubricant to ease his passage through the garden. One push and he rolled down the sloping lawn, just as children once tumbled in play. When Madja reached the shoreline, he was wrapped in a blanket of snow. She pulled him like a toboggan over the rough surface of the lake. They passed the jetty, towards the centre. She dumped him with his rubbish. The doorbell rang a few days later. Mrs. Anderson, would you like some apple tea, officer? I have some on the stove. When she came back into the living room, the policeman was looking at a pencil sketch that hung on the wall. He waited until she was seated before he sat down. She wondered if they taught manners at the police academy. I have some bad news, Mrs. Anderson. We found a body on the lake. He was drunk, fell, and froze to death on the ice. We don't get many visitors once summer has gone. The policeman took another sip of tea, then another. Excellent tea, just like my grandma made. Would you like some more? Madger went back to the kitchen. She paused at the counter, looking out across the lake. They had taken the rubbish away when they found the body. The lake stretched out in front of her, clean and clear, its icy surface glinting in the low sunlight. There would be no more visitors that winter.